It's a real pleasure to be introduced to Ecodemia and to have this wonderful opportunity to be part of your conversation. And that is all that I would like to do. I just want us to have a simple conversation about ideas that I have been entertaining over a long period of time. In terms of my life's commitment, right from even before I became a teenager in my own home country of Ghana in West Africa, when the politics unfolding around me with the overthrow of the first government of Ghana as it proclaimed its independence on 6 March 1957. And then by 1966, you can imagine when I was barely 10 years old, we had the overthrow of that government of led by Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah, which with all its, weaknesses, was seriously committed to pursuing an independent path for progress, not just for the small country of Ghana, but also for Africa, and was very much a champion of Pan-African champion of the unification of African people across the world, so that I've become a global force to be able to take control of our destiny and be able to plan and design our own, way of achieving the kind of Africa and the world, that we needed, according to our own best interests. He was an active internationalist, was one of the historical founding fathers of the non-aligned movement, and that politics shaped the aspirations of a lot of our young people. And so after the overthrow of the government of Kwame Nkrumah in 1966, when even our parents felt that there were certain shortcomings with our government, and some people felt that things probably might improve, and then we saw a worsening of the conditions, a deterioration of the living standards of our people. We saw the destruction of what were the positive gains in particularly education, and there were increasing lack of opportunities for us as young people to experience the kind of pursuit of knowledge that broadened our horizons, that made us feel that we're part of a people who had control of their destiny, who could, shape things and design things in a way that suited, our African personality, our African communities, and we could take our rightful place, with honor, amongst, the rest of humanity. We saw all these things, which were the kind of things that registered in the public consciousness, of ourselves as young people and our parents. We saw all these things begin to fall away. Things literally were falling apart. And so life was becoming, meaningless. We saw, for example, the fact that the Kwame Nkrumah government paid a lot of attention to the environment. We had a whole ministry of parks and gardens. We had, that's actually ensured that landscapes, were beautifully, designed, and also incorporated, or beginning to incorporate into these designs traditional African symbols and cultural a material and spiritual culture that meant so much, you know, for our people. We could connect. All these things were beginning to disappear, and we saw an increasing domination of our lives, particularly in the educational institutions that we were as young people. We saw foreign influence, heavy foreign influence, domination of everything, you know, Western, everything particularly, you know, European in terms of whiteness. And that began to simply, you know, provoke in us resistance. And that is how, as a young person, I began to cut my teeth, you know, in scholar activism, because the kind of education we're being given was not training us for anything meaningful. And we had to find other ways of educating ourselves, learning more from our communities, you know, beginning to show greater attention, you know, to the wealth of knowledge and experience and the beauty that was in our culture, recognizing some of the shortcomings and the need to progress, but also becoming more defensive of what we thought were the achievements of our people, and the attempt now to impose upon us models, you know, of, you know, beauty, development, as it were, you know, that's ran counter to what we thought, you know, best suited, you know, us. And that is where I started taking a keen interest, not just through reading, but also in the practical realities of everyday life in decolonization. And in this, you know, I was guided even in my secondary school days by a very interesting book written by Osejifo Kwame Kru, actually a number of books. One was the book Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism. And then the other one was Conscientism, which, you know, is described as a philosophy and ideology for decolonization. By that time, Kwame Nkrumah was supposed to be in exile in a neighboring country of Guinea-Conakry. But then he kept on writing profusely. He kept on, you know, broadcasting speeches to the country, and that fired the imagination of a lot of us as young people. And so, you know, the fight against imperialism for decolonization was a very practical reality in our everyday lives. And, you know, the world of the Africa and the world of the 60s, 70s, you know, was actually a world, you know, in turmoil, a world, you know, very much where lots of people were seeking change and fighting for change. The African liberation movements were still very active, trying to get rid of the last bastions of direct colonization, you know, in Africa, and all of that influenced our thinking. The anti-apartheid struggle, all of that, you know, influenced our consciousness, and therefore shaped our attitudes and involvement in the movements for decolonization. So coming then to what decolonization means, of course, a lot of water has passed through the bridge. Many years have passed. That struggle against foreign domination of Africa has taken me, you know, and many of my colleagues into the continent of Africa. And who's this? And pardon. Well, just to repeat, that struggle. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
you.
Yeah,
that struggle has seen me, you know, and many others of my colleagues come, you know, out of Africa into exile. And for over 20 years now, I have been in political exile in the United Kingdom. But it hasn't dampened my spirits. I have, you know, they say, you know, what absence makes the heart grow fonder. I've grown much more in love with my Africa. I have found home away from home. I've met very beautiful people who have enriched my lives, have, broadened my own horizons, have made me every day of my life to be learning something new from everybody. Wonderful people. There have been, positive and negative challenges, but I've taken them in my stride, But then the learning is amazing. And one of the things that I've really grown more passionate about is the need to ensure that decolonization becomes manifest more in the environment that surrounds us. That we have to ensure that we stop the destruction of the environment in pursuit of so-called development, which in reality is maldevelopment. I had to come into a country like the United Kingdom that was held as the mother country, that was held as the model of development, to recognize that this model of development means death, not only for my African people, but for all humanity. And I have found, real solidarity within certain circles of the society in this country that also have been in resistance. And we've tried to find, even though it's been very, very challenging, the kind of racism of whiteness that permeates everything, in this country and in Europe as a whole. I've met people who have been part of this resistance of trying to build new kinds of relationships, to reach out to better understand each other, to try and, as we say in the Black community here, overstand the divisions, that have separated us, that have created a lot of misunderstanding. Cognitive justice has become a very important thing, where the use of our languages, our cultures, and so on have become extremely very important to me. And so decolonization really has become something that is not just theoretical. There's a lot of, indulgence in decolonization rhetorics as academic exercises in higher institutions of education in this country. And I've had the opportunities to engage with friends who are in academia. I've had opportunities to also do research, be a research fellow in some academic institutions in this country. And, what I've seen in academia has never really, encouraged me. I mean, I think, as some of my friends say, there's a lot of bullshit that goes on in, establishment academia in this country, and there's a lot of obscurantism, and so on. As much as there are some people who are trying to use these opportunities to pursue knowledge truthfully, and I see Truth Quest as a challenging but honorable pursuit. I think spaces in academia, in what I call establishment academia, should not be vacated. And more than any time in my life, the lessons from the example of Pan-Africanist scholar activists like Walter Rodney, who talked about being guerrilla intellectuals in spaces of establishment academia, have become very meaningful to me. But alongside that is to create grassroots, basis of scholar activism that should be academia within our own communities of resistance. And I hope that Ecodemia, will be fulfilling that kind of role, where we have spaces of truth quest pursuits of real knowledge, facing the challenges that life brings, before us, and being able to develop the creativity of ordinary people, so that the pursuit of knowledge can become a meaningful, thing, not just in terms of pursuing material things, but also the spiritual fulfillment of self, which makes life worth living. And it is in that sense that I see decolonization, particularly relevant to design. I believe now more than ever before that the greatest challenge of design is how humankind can use its wealth, its legacies of huge wealth of knowledge that all communities all over the ages have worked at producing, the best of which is not necessarily to be found in establishment academia, in the best of which remains in the hearts and minds and spirits of human beings, the best of which is kept in our homes, in our families, in our communities, in the living world around us, the best of which really, really is to be found in a natural environment. How humanity can use its brains and bronze to be able to design things that harmonize human life with the natural environment. So the ecological harmonization of the built and the natural environment, has become the challenge, that we as humankind ought to face. And, living in times of worsening climate and ecological crisis, that is the direct result of centuries, of the mistaken attempt of humankind to dominate nature, to make itself the center of the universe, to think that, we own the earth instead of recognizing that, as indigenous knowledge says, we belong to the earth, right? This is the challenge that we face. So how in this day and age now, knowing what we know, seeing what is happening, seeing the huge threats that is posed to us in terms of real possibility, we are the generations that now are living in times where we have the real possibility of losing the entire planet, right? Of getting extinct, in this world. We have already made our pursuit of maldevelopment, already has made many, many life forms extinct, including human communities. Languages have gone extinct. Plant lives have gone extinct. Bird lives have gone extinct. We see what is happening, to the environment. We are the generation that if we do not stop short to look at how we can redesign our own lives and enable everything else, including humankind, to flourish naturally, then, we will be the most stupid beings that have ever occupied this earth, looking at our own trajectory of knowledge, accumulated knowledge, accumulated, material and spiritual wealth, and we have everything that it takes to change and be the change, except, in my view, cowardice. Cowardice is what is preventing us from seizing the times to make the changes that Mother Earth as a planet, is telling us we have to make, and is able to, if we understand the rhythms of nature, we are more than capable of making these changes if we only stop being cowardly and take the path that clearly all accumulated knowledge points to, at this time. And that is why I believe that there will be no serious solution to the climate and ecological crisis, and to everything else that humanity, faces. There will be absolutely no solution to any problem unless we grasp the challenge of redesigning. our very presence on this planet Earth, right? And that means look at the built environment. The built environment has to be one where human beings are not seeking that, when I come around into any space, that everything else in nature should be subdued and make way for human presence. What about the ancient wisdom of designing things in such a way that human life is compatible with the lives of everything else on this planet? Do we have to change the course of rivers? Do we have to move mountains? Do we really need all that we are seeking under the soil? Right? Isn't there more than enough to make life actually intellectually and spiritually fulfilling above the surface? Right? And that when we need something from below or from any other form of life, we do so with reverence, right, to everything else around us. And I think that is the challenge. That is what designers are, for me, people in the vanguard of, the alternative. I mean, it's not just in the field of politics, these can just point directions, but the actual work of saving life on this planet, is in the hands of designers. And design should be something that we do not make something so specialized, technically specialized, that is beyond what each and every one of us, can do in our little kind of ways. Design should be, how do you think you can live in whatever space that, you find on this earth, and live as much as what anybody else can see as an enrichment of nature, and as little a destructive footprint as possible. I mean, that's how we have to learn to live. And we have to just look back at our ancestors. Yes, they were not perfections, right, of the best of environmental practice, but they tried in their wisdom, to ensure that they didn't play, the superhuman who could just change the course of rivers, destroy mountains, dig so deep, looking for what, beneath the soil. They tried to live life as, would enable, a more harmonious relationship with nature. And I think that if humanity, particularly the younger generations, assisted by adults who see the necessity for all this, can courageously face the need to restructure education. And that for me is the first starting point. Education that is no longer that of locking up people in rooms, so-called classrooms, and getting them to be, to think that knowledge is to be found in books. I think nature, the kind of educational spaces that are more in nature, where people learn to appreciate, just living wild, and seeing the real challenge of civilization in being how you are able as a human being to live wild with everything else around you, taking as little as possible that is destructive of the space in which you live, right? And being able to get everything locally, okay? Or let's say as much as you can locally, so that we have less dependence, on what you get from outside your local community, and how then it becomes a pleasure to travel from one place to the other, even within one country, and see the power of the creativity of people. And it's not just people, human beings who can be creative. Look at animals, look at birds, look at insects, if we can just let them flourish and be able to design ways of human living, that are compatible with the lives of other things around us. And we learn to live that way. What beauty, can we have? What peace can the human being have? There will be no need to go to war over resources somewhere else, because most of what you need, you have. And, other communities can welcome you and share with you because they don't see you as coming to invade, to grab, and to hoard. They welcome you to come into their spaces and see the creativity with which they are also trying to live with nature in their localities. Okay? We will no longer be threats to each other. Humans beings will be no serious threat to animals, or plants or anything. And that is a possibility, but it lies in the hands of designers. Okay, to show practically the way, we can only imagine, we can only think, we can only, envision, but it is for designers to practically create. And as I'm speaking now, we have communities in my own original country of Ghana, in Africa, and talking and experiencing through travel, lives in other parts of the world. We have people, communities that want assistance to be able to know how, in designing things that will ensure the ecological harmony of the built and the natural environment, they can do their best, and we need to have people who are there to assist these communities, to be able to share with them the wealth of knowledge that, is available, to be able to, and that is, you see, the challenge that we have is we've got a certain disorientation of ordinary people where even when they know this is the correct thing to do, to endeavor to design and live their lives in harmony with nature in their local environment, you have external forces that come and make them feel that that is the wrong thing to do. That way of thinking is an obstacle to so-called development, and that they need to give way, to these, corporate experts, and sometimes this comes from, so-called academic institutions, who make them feel that they lack knowledge, they are backward, they need to step away so that, their spaces are controlled by external forces. And it is only when they become subordinated, to the super exploitation and control of these external forces that they will be making, developmental, steps forward. And I think that, we need people from institutions, from organizations like Ecodemia that will accompany ordinary people so that when governments and corporations descend upon their communities and try to disorientate them by saying that the knowledges they've accumulated, for centuries and passed from one generation to the other, the environment they know best, from which they have, which has sustained them, and they've cared for this environment, they need to vacate, their agency. They need to let go of their agency in those environments so that these environments can be redesigned and reshaped by corporate forces. They need people from educational organizations, from advocacy organizations that can help them, defend their own confidence in what their ancestors have given them, to be able, yes, every generation has to make progress. You cannot be standing still, but progress that you self-determine, progress that is compatible with, the values that you have shaped, to guide life in your specific environment. Progress that will not harm your own community nor make you harm other people, right? People in our villages, in our small towns, need support, particularly in the global south, so that they are not pushed down this, fast tracking, railroad, to worsening the climate and ecological crisis. Because that for me is a challenge. So when, together with my colleagues in the Stop the Manganese, which are genocide ecocide campaign, say, stop the manganese. What we say is this: the first step that we need to take, is ensure that no community allows itself to be pushed again to worsen the situation. As we are speaking, we have so-called experts with so-called academics, with so-called government planners, right? Descending upon communities right now, right? Dispossessing them, taking control of their spaces, and forcing them to abandon ways that have held them, to sustain life, their own lives and that of others. Can we put a full stop to that? Can we support them to continue to improve their ways of living better with, in the environment without worsening the environmental conditions around them? Can we build international support systems? And this is what we're trying to do, from the Extinction Rebellion International Solidarity Network. Now, how can we build, international solidarity connections across the world amongst communities, so that they support each other with shared learning, in order to defend, the best of what they've got, and also to undo the harm to themselves and their community. And this is where it calls also for honesty. And as much as Extinction Rebellion is battling, to meet some of the challenges of some of its own declared positions, like tell the truth and, and act now and so on and so forth, I think some progress has been achieved. And we are proud of the influence that we have brought, into Extinction Rebellion, not in terms of people who've come and know it better than everybody else and are pontificating and so on. No, but encouraging shared learning, critical interrogation of various perspectives, trying to ensure that Extinction Rebellion becomes this broad, umbrella canopy, where there are autonomous spaces, for, different perspectives, different ways of looking at the world, and being able to actually learn from each other. And this is what is beginning to happen within Extinction Rebellion. And this is what groups like Ecodemia, I hopefully should, intervene to catalyze, further. And, the challenge is to ensure that this work, encourages ordinary people in their communities to once again feel that they can be people who determine their place, their own place in this world. That they have the knowledge, and they have the control, to determine what happens, in their spaces, with everything else that is around them. And for me, I have no prescriptions, to make in terms of the exact forms in which design should be like. I want to be guided by those who have made that particular field of study, their focus. My own field is in law, so I can bring that knowledge, and experience, to work with designers. But I think the first thing is to, and it's very strange, I want to end on this note. It is very strange when we live in a world where the ability of ordinary people to know what is best for them in their local environment through studying respectfully what exists around them, right? Through having reverence for everything you find on this planet. And some people came as conquistadores and thought that when you respect a plant that is, worship, devilish worship. No, it's just reverence for another form of life. When you respect an animal, right, so that you don't just wantonly kill it, it has its place in cosmology, right? When you respect a mountain, a water body, an insect, right? And you show reverence for it, it is not, and that is the height of civilization. When even the smallest of creatures, you see them as having an equal place as yourself, right? That is the world I hope we will return to. And then these concrete jungles that are being called, urban spaces, where we see less of nature in its rawness. We can see them for what they truly are. Spaces for the dehumanization and destruction of who we must be. And if we can then gather the courage to go back, not necessarily to bury ourselves in the past, but as in our African concept of sarcophagus, which is you go back into the past to pick the best that is valid for critically understanding your present, but also more challenges you to chart a better way into the future, not just for your own generations, but also to carry on your ancestry, and the present generations into the future. This is what we can do. And there are many communities that will benefit from what Ecodemia is trying to do. And with these ideas, they're trying to work with these ideas to see, how they can, practically realize their own self-determination, but also contribute, to defending the little that is left of our natural world, so that it can be handed to future generations. I have immense faith in the wisdom and ability of humanity to pull itself from the brink, right? And for the sake of preservation of our species, to know what needs to be courageously done in order to let life flourish in its fullness, all forms of life. And I think that designers can work together with some of us who see ourselves more as, campaigning advocates, to encourage the kind of reorientation of our people that will restore confidence in our ability, again, to pass on a world beautified by the modesty and humility of our human presence to future generations to come. And if this is the world work we can do together with Ecodemia, and I'm more than happy to continue working with you. Thank you very much.